Okay, hello. Can you hear?
Hi.
Okay, hi. Okay, we can start.
Sorry, I hope you weren't waiting too long.
Okay, I don't hear you. Michal, I don't hear you.
But I'm not muted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, I hear you. Okay, thank you. Dear professors, ladies and gentlemen, the Faculty of Economics, University of Kragujevac welcomes you at the online guest lecture, which will be given by an expert from Israel, Innovation and Entrepreneurship. My name is Dana Zlatanovic. I am Associate Professor at the Faculty of Economics, Kragujevac, and I'm going to be the moderator at this lecture. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce you today's guest. Michal Michaeli is the Director of International Economic Development in Tel Aviv Global, focusing on fostering the Center of Innovation. It is a municipal national effort to attract international entrepreneurs, investors, and startups through creating value, creating barriers, and creating a set of incentives. It allows Tel Aviv to develop the center of the startup nation to a world-leading innovation hub. Michal has extensive experience in working with the leading companies ranging from cutting-edge startup, retail, and consumers market leaders. Her expertise is on helping startups define their vision, mission, and initial strategy. Michaeli, of Business Administration, Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and a bachelor's degree in arts, actually management and behavior science from the College of Academic Studies. Ms. Michaeli, thank you for accepting our invitation. We would like to thank to the Embassy of Israel, particularly Mrs. Daniela Page, for connecting us with such an expert. At the same time, we would like to express our gratitude to our city administration and Biznis Iinovacionog Centra for helping us in organizing today's lecture. I would like to emphasize this lecture is followed by our students of Master Academic Studies from various modules such as Innovation, Logical Entrepreneurship, International Management in Public Sector, but also students from the module Marketing and Management. Also, we have some students from Bachelor Studies and also from the modules such as Management and Marketing. At the same time, the lecture by our professors, our management and vice deans, the representatives of Israel, the representatives of City Administration of Kragujevc and Biznis Iinovacionog Centra. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Zoran Đorović from City Administration of Kragujevac to address you. Mr. Đorović, please address the audience. You should unmute. Okay.
Dobro večer svima, želim da vas pozdravim sve u ime Gradske uprave grada Kragujevca i pre svega da se zahvalim ambasadi Izraela na izuzetnoj saradnji koju smo imali u dosadašnjem i imat ćemo naravno u budućem periodu, kroz sve one aktivnosti koje ostvarujemo u promociji ekonomskih potencijala našeg grada, izraelskih kompanija, naravno u nesebičnom transferu znanja koje ostvarujemo na polju start-upa, preduzetništva i IKT-a i inovacija. Ono što bih preporučio studentima svakako je da upijaju današnje izlaganje, jer mnogo toga imaju zaista da nauče od izraelskih stručnjaka i kompanija. I ja sam imao jednu zaista privilegiju i jedno izuzetno iskustvo da boravim u Izraelu u jednoj sjajnoj poseti, jednoj studijskoj poseti sa ostalim kolegama iz praktično svih kontinenta ovog sveta i na licu mesta sam imao priliku da vidim deo toga kako izraelski sistem start-upa, odnosno start-up nacije funkcioniše. Ono što je posebno bitno je to da istaknemo koliko je obrazovanje bitan segment u preduzetničkom načinu razmišljanja, u pristupu, start-upu i nedvosmisleno je zaista da je univerzitet jedan od ključnih nosilaca uspeha i pokretačke snage u tom progresivnom načinu razmišljanja izraelskog ekosistema. Ono što bih želeo da istaknem da mi moramo prosto malo da razbijemo naše predrasude i da i neuspeh ne shvatamo kao poraz, već jedno dragoceno iskustvo koje će nam pomoći u narednom periodu da naš biznis, odnosno naše inovacije, naš posao koji budemo pokretali iskoristimo i iz koga možemo da generišemo neke buduće uspehe. Naravno, za grad Kragujevac, odnosno Biznis Iinovacioni Centar je veoma bitno da nađemo strateškog partnera iz start-up nacije, iz domena njihovih kompanija, da zbog samog transfera znanja i naravno korišćenja iskustva i sa jedne i sa druge strane, naravno mi od njih imamo dosta toga da naučimo, a naravno i zbog učešća na projektima međunarodnog donatora, odakle možemo da povučemo značajna sredstva. I zaista za kraj bih voleo da citiram, sada već slobodno mogu reći prijatelja Rona Natanzona iz Ministarstva inostranih poslova, u kome on kaže da oni zaista veruju da inovacije otvaraju vrata i kreiraju mostove između država i naroda. I u to sam se zaista uverio i kada neko bude imao priliku da poseti Izrael i da to vidi na licu mesta, moja topla preporuka, naravno ne možemo svi, ali zaista mnogo toga imamo da naučimo. Želim vam uspešan rad i dosta dobrih znanja i informacije preneti. Hvala vam.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Đorović. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Michal Michaeli from Biznis Iinovacionog Centra to address you. Michal, can you please address us? Michal, can you hear us?
Me čujete?
Okay, we hear you.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank the host, the Faculty of Economics from Kragujevcu, with which we have a long-term cooperation, which are expanding and improving from year to year. I would also like to thank the Embassy of Israel for their cooperation, and special thank for our guest, Michal Michaeli, who took the time to be with us today and to share her rich experience with us. I hope that in the future we continue to cooperate with the Embassy of Israel and its experts in the field of innovation and entrepreneurship. And I hope that we hear and we have possibility to hear a lot of experience from the other experts in the field of startup and that I also hope that in the future we will have the opportunity to hear many more experience of their experts in the field of establishing startup companies and importance of these companies for improving the economic growth of the region and the country. And just a few more words about the Biznis Iinovacionog Centra that I will say on Serbian. Pre svega da pozdravim sve studente Ekonomskog fakulteta, sve profesore naravno, da se zahvalim na dugogodišnjoj saradnji. Nadam se da ćemo tu saradnju u budućnosti još više proširiti, da pozovem sve studente da prate naš rad, ukoliko se odluče da pokrenu sopstveni posao, da znaju da od Biznis Iinovacionog Centra, u Biznis Iinovacionom Centru mogu naći podršku, da mogu dobiti sve informacije i oko izvora finansiranja, i oko odpočinjenja posla, i oko izrade biznis plana i svega onoga što im je neophodno, naravno i tu i prostor s kojim trenutno raspolažemo, koji mogu dobiti pod nekim subvencionisanim uslovima za svoj posao, a nadam se da ćemo u budućnosti stvoriti još dodatnih uslova da im omogućimo što lakše započinjanje posla i ulazak u svet biznisa. Hvala svima i želim vam ugodno večer.
Okay, many thanks to Mr. Đorović. Now let's proceed with the lecture, but also before we start with the lecture, I would like to emphasize that you can ask questions or leave comments via our chat. Now I would like to address the students Serbian. Dragi studenti, možete postavljati pitanja i ostavljati komentare putem našeg četa i hvala vam svima što ste danas prisutni na ovom predavanju, tako da sada ćemo da čujemo predavača. Ja se nadam da ćete se aktivno uključiti u diskusiju. Ms. Michaeli, please start your lecture and share your presentation.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here. I have 30 minutes or less than that, just so I know.
You can talk as many you need.
I can't share I need host permissions. It wouldn't let me share my presentation.
Okay.
Okay, now it works, great. Okay, so I'm taking this opportunity to show you beautiful pictures of our city, Tel Aviv. And thank you so much for the great intro and the invitation. I love to talk to you about my entrepreneurial path, actually, and what I've gone through it's amazing to say a few decades already. But I want to start with saying hi, and it's very nice to meet you. This is me with my husband and son in Amsterdam when we were very fortunate to manage to visit just before the outbreak of COVID in last January. And this is one of the things that we really enjoy and we hope to be back doing soon. Now, I think it's important to understand when talking about my journey and the way that I became entrepreneur and investor and eventually working for the local government, and to have a sense of how it all started. And for me, understanding that I grew up as an average Israeli Jewish girl, starting in school, of course, but then later, the next step for Israelis is going to the army, as you probably know that we have a mandatory service, men and women alike, and we do between 2 to 3 years. It depends on the assignment. And actually, this was the first time that I really find out my connection to technology, because the army decided that I should be a computer programmer. Now I'm talking to you almost 30 years ago, which it wasn't a very known thing back then. It was a pre-time of having a PC at any home. And it wasn't something, I remember talking to people and saying, this is what I do in the army, and they would say, what is this place? What exactly do you do? And we were working on, old mainframe with writing in AL and assembler and very basic hard languages back in the days. And it actually was an amazing thing for me, an amazing experience of how I understood that I really understand and love technology. Because before that, I wasn't a strong math or physics student. I didn't think that this would be the course of my life. And you have to understand that in Israel, this is one of the major paths to technology success. Many of the startups are based on people that finished their army service in one of those units. And in the last 20 some years, it became much more obvious. My son now is serving in such a unit. So he also went through a course very similar to mine, but now it's very prestigious. And now when he will finish his service, he will have an occupation. When I had to go to the university, nobody really knew then what was the best, what was it helping me then? So again, this is some of the things that I know that we are in a way fortunate to have, but not fortunate to go to the army, but at least if you manage to do it in that way, it's very important. But it also stands in the basis of the difference that people are having later in their lives here. And now, of course, after the army service, you go to the academia, and already, as Diana mentioned, I did my undergrad degree and later my MBA. And while then, I didn't really know where would my career will take me. So that's why I usually look at my career when starting only in the first company they went to do, it's actually an Israeli that became an American company called Converse back in the end of the 1990s. That was the first golden years of the Israeli tech. And Converse back then was an amazing company and a true scale-up. It started as a very local company that matured, bought its American competitor, and we were serving all of actually the telecommunication providers around the world, mobile and landline back then, and starting with products that are now actually, which is funny because I was working on a product which is very similar to what Siri is these days, but 16 years before, when the technology actually wasn't mature enough. But this was actually my true school for working in a tech company, working in a multinational company. I was actually the product manager and later the marketing manager for this platform. And I was working with customers from Morocco on one hand and Japan on the other, and all of Europe and the United States. So we were flying everywhere. We were talking in conferences and events, and it was a great lesson. I was only 27 years old when I started working there, and it like opened the world to me in that sense. All of these and all of, one of the main lessons that I took from it was to being actually later as an entrepreneur, that you can really lead and bring your own initiative inside even a huge corporate or a huge company. Because when I was working then on this product that I told you, like Siri, we called Telago, actually it was a very niche product, the company, nobody really understand it, nobody really want to promote it. And that actually, instead of just saying, oh, it's not in the forefront of the company, it's not the thing that gets the most budget, the most attention, gave me a lot of freedom and a lot of available places to come and both practice my abilities and understand exactly how to do it right, but also gave me a lot of freedom to really go forward and succeed. And actually we did very well with this product, which unfortunately later on was changed. After almost 6 years in this company, I moved to the Israeli then leading cellular provider, Pelephone. And I was heading the roaming division, again, working with a lot of countries, taking all my expertise from the mobile world into Pelephone and its international division, and managing over 100 people in the unit. And mainly responsible for a lot of the revenues that this service was providing. Pelephone at the time was, I don't know if you, maybe even if you heard of, there was GSM companies, like most of the companies that we know today, the cellular operators, and they were the CDMA ones, which is an old protocol and much harder to roam with. So we had to find, and again, unbelievable solutions and ideas to get over it. And this is actually how we started to work very closely with startups that came to us as a customer and offered us a lot of their services or wanted to partner with us or to use us as beta site. And one of those teams that came to us, two very interesting entrepreneurs, convinced me to join them and start our own venture and start with BeamUps, who was a media startup. We actually, and again, quite a while ago, they came with the idea actually that if you want to, just as you have Facebook Live or other platforms today, they were just starting to have video on the cameras, on the telephones, so you can take and picture whatever you see and post it online and even sell it to the news buddies. And we raised the first round, even we worked on that, but later the company didn't succeed. Like many other, didn't go through that death valley and grew. So I went on consulting, but I will mostly focus on the next two steps. The first one is the one that through that I met Daniela, who you mentioned before, and actually also visited Serbia and attended in Belgrade in a conference. The Daniela invited me to. And now, in the last year and a half, I'm actually working for the Tel Aviv municipality and for Tel Aviv Global. Now, all through my entrepreneurial or tech career, I was used to this, vision, which you really quite rarely see. The very long line to the men's room while the ladies' room is open. And this is something that, from my experience, you see either in a football match or in a tech conference. And this is taken from one of the tech conferences because there are very few women there. And this is something that bothered me all through the way. Starting when I was a soldier, as I told you, in the computer programming course, we were less than 30% women and not, I think, only 20-something graduated. Until now, none of them stayed in the industry and managed to work as in startup or other companies, but still. And this is something that I was used to being the only woman in the room, or didn't really know other entrepreneurs, didn't know women entrepreneurs. And I was very keen on finding out why and trying to change that. And then I decided to come up with Eva Ventures. And Eva Ventures, just a few more statistics, the fact that I saw that the women were underrepresented in tech, just as they are in all of the business world, but it's even harder and even much more evident in tech. And you see the numbers that I'm showing here are Israeli, but they're very similar in many places. The fact that you have around 30% women in tech in all of the company, including non-technology positions, but as the bigger the chair gets and the position, the fewer women you have on board. And of course, it reflects the startup, and that you have less than 10% of the Israeli startup have women founders as part of the team. And again, as I said, this is, I think, from 2 or 3 years ago, the numbers, but it didn't really change in the 6-7 years that I've been dealing with it. So this was very amazing for me to understand, especially when you look at the numbers for the investors and you see that there's so much research, there's so many evidence to the fact that if you have diversity, if you have women on board, but diversity actually includes a lot of the facts, you get better results, you get better return on your money. And for me, that was an amazing understanding, and the opportunity that I believe I can work with. And also, it's not only good for the investors, it's also good for the startup themselves. In this world, which is so changing all the time, which has to be very, very flexible, to be listening to your customers and what's happening. In the last year, I think showed us that times many, you get the same benefits and the same revenues from having the diversity. So I decided that after really understanding which are the barriers for that, why do women don't really become entrepreneurs? Why there are so few? And of course, I can only talk about that for 2 hours, so I won't get into it in detail. But of course, and you can understand also the basic with the social and cultural thing, the fact that we don't really raise our girls to be entrepreneurs. And when you see small girls, young girls play in a playground, usually their parents, even their mothers would say, be careful, don't climb on that, make sure that you keep clean and tidy. And for boys, usually they're encouraged to find out their boundaries and to find out to dare and try to see where they can go. The fact that there aren't enough role models. If I ask you who are the most promising entrepreneurs, who are the best CEOs, usually you would say the same old names and not women, because even if there are, and of course there are some, they're usually not in the front. They're usually not that viable and notable because they're not working in it in that sense. And the whole issue of networking, which women do differently for men, and that's why, as the research again shows, they do it in smaller groups and much more becoming friends and not network in a business way, which actually hurt them later. And also, this is something that is, again, very unique to Israel. The fact that men in the army usually are the ones that have been selected to this tech and all the promising units. They too have a majority of men in them, is also something that is later hurting the women that want to get ahead in the industry. And the last one is, of course, the funding, which is based on all the other that I mentioned, because if you're not connected, if you don't know where and how to go and bring and to raise money to your startup, you won't get there. And this is why I decided to focus there on the funding. And I started Eva Ventures. We raised $7 million. We wanted to raise more and to start a whole VC, but actually eventually it didn't really happen. Here in the middle, you can see in Belgrade. This is the panel that I attended in Belgrade. We invested in 6 companies in the end because we didn't set up a venture capital, but we worked more as an investment club. So we had to start everything fresh every time we wanted to invest in a company. And in 2 of the company, we went on to later rounds. But this, again, you don't have enough money to really back the company to success. So I understood that, though I really enjoyed that, the fact that I went with my co-founders to raise money from investors, to persuade them to give me their money to invest for them, though I didn't really have proven track record in investing. This was the first major barrier that we had to tackle, and we really had to understand and define who's our would be. It's not the audience. It's not actually target audience. It's the target investors. Eventually, we started with the closed circles and going beneath that and going. Most of our investors in the end were from the United States, and just building the strategy and building all these materials that you have to show them. You have to bring to them so they understand that you're serious enough, that you know what you're doing, that eventually you will get them, hopefully, the returns that they are looking for. So that was almost 7 years altogether of the fundraising. And we mentored and supported a lot of the programs from young entrepreneurs to going with the companies in their advisory board. And I attended I tried to count, but hundreds really of conferences and events and panels, definitely in Israel and the United States, but also in Europe and also in South America. And it took me this amazing experience really to unbelievable places. And I met the most impressive people. And one of the pictures here, the one beneath, is from the Israeli parliament, when we actually worked with the government to try to build support packages and all kind of vehicles to advance women entrepreneurs. But eventually, after 6 years in that, I decided that this picture is still pretty much the same. And I felt that though I was very, very certain this is the way to change the world in my little corner, it was not enough. And while thinking of exactly what is next and where should I go next, I was offered a position, in Tel Aviv. I live in Tel Aviv. I've been in many years, and I'm not sure that all of you know it. And for me, usually the big question is, what do I get up in the morning for? And I need to do something that is exciting for me, that I see my contribution, that I know that I really have an impact. And that's why when this opportunity came, I jumped on it. Now, just to tell you, the Tel Aviv Global, where I work today, is actually a subsidiary of the Tel Aviv municipality, and it's the municipality's global arm. Everything has to do with anything international is done with us. It's the international media and communication. In Tel Aviv, you have more than 500 media outlets that usually are located there, and we work very closely with them. telling the Tel Aviv story, answering their questions, but also working with them to build that on. The whole tourism issue is managed at our organization, and my department, which is the International Economic Development. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Tel Aviv. I don't know, and I can ask how many of you were in Tel Aviv already. I hope many, and I hope those who weren't will come hopefully shortly when this is over and we can travel again. And we try to proud ourselves to be a city, the non-stop city. Actually, the city is very, very vibrant and living, and it holds also great beaches and the old culture of Jaffa. Now, sorry. Now, when looking in Tel Aviv, and I know in European measures, it's very funny, you have to basically remember that it's a very, very small city in size and in population. Tel Aviv is only 52 square kilometers inside. If you see here the comparison to Berlin, London, New York, and San Francisco, we want to compare ourselves with them. But eventually, we're small. We have to remember that. Sometimes it's hard to remember. But also in population, we're less than 500,000 people. All of Israel is around 9 million people, 9 million residents. And Jerusalem, which is the bigger, is almost twice the size of Tel Aviv, almost 900,000 people. But Tel Aviv also have 1 million people commute into it every day. Again, pre-COVID. Now, of course, everything is different. But now, Tel Aviv is considered to be a very young city. And not young in the sense that it has a lot of children, but young because the relevant age group of 18 to 35 is what really makes it such a vibrant, such a living, such a party on one side, but startup on the other side. So, and definitely when you measure it against European cities and European population, it's very young. And of course, it's a center for Israel for starting from business and going through culture and cuisine. You know, we are the vegan capital of the world, I think. And also, as I said, and one of my missions is to make sure that we remains the startup city of the startup nation. Now that actually means that when Israel is known, I think for many years now, that it's a startup nation, it has over almost 9,000 startups in Israel. It's usually just as much as they are in New York, for example. But a third of that is in Tel Aviv. And half of that, or a little more than half of that is in the Tel Aviv metropolitan area, sorry. Which I know that for us, when you live in a city, the boundaries are very clear to you, definitely in a municipality. But for the world, the Tel Aviv area is actually holding 4,000 startups. Now, these numbers, I can tell you, are from 2019. And we have the 2020 numbers now. We will issue a report soon, but it's actually grew. So even in a year like that, it was actually, we showed a lot of resilience. Now that means that it's one startup for every 200 some residents. And I always joke that if you say that in Los Angeles, if you go to a cafe, the waiter will, and you will just ask him, the waiter will immediately give you the screenplay that he already wrote and the movie that he's working on that. So in Israel, usually the barista is working on their startup and they will pitch it to you gladly anytime. But it's true part of the city and what the city vibe is. Now, it's not only startup. It's hard and it's great to know that we have almost 3,000 startups, but it's not only that. We have multinational companies that chose Israel to open their R&D centers. You probably know their names and I will get into it details later, but it's again, a very strong part of the ecosystem. We have the growth companies, the companies that used to be a startup, but are now became to the age that are really occupying a lot of the city's scape. Now, as I mentioned, these R&D centers, the foreign R&D centers, you probably know those names. And many of them chose Tel Aviv either by buying one of the companies, buying a startup, and then on the basis of that startup, started their R&D center, or that they just understand that they have here the talent and again, and all the supporting envelope to start this, this activity. And even in 2020, we had 7 new companies that joined this, just as MasterCard or Flywire and DraftKings and others. But even in the midst of the first lockdown, I remember that we got the notification that we have 2 new multinational companies that are opening their offices here. It usually sparks the discussion between their benefits, because on one hand, everybody is very happy to get this recognition and to have this. Google, for example, have over 1,000 people working at their office here. But on the other hand, if you ask startup, they would say that the big companies are the one that's stealing all the talent, that they're paying and they're giving better conditions, and it's making their life harder. And of course, there is always the tension between the contribution and the shortage of that. The other sector that I mentioned before are the scale-ups, those companies that matured enough, that are employing now thousands, hundreds, 2,000 of employees. And from the municipality point of view, we have a lot of more interfaces with them that we have. And it's very important. And one of my missions was to make sure that they will stay in the city. Because sometimes you say that a small startup can actually, doesn't really have a lot of options and they must be in the big city, start their way there when they have all the funding bodies, the VCs around them, all the accelerators. But then when they grow up, they usually go to much less expensive cities. So we want to keep them because they're a major contributor to the ecosystem. It's those companies that usually really support young entrepreneurs. In Israel, and especially in Tel Aviv, those entrepreneurs that are made it in a way that they're now IPO'd in NASDAQ or have huge sums of money raised, are usually very keen on supporting the ecosystem. They host the event at their offices. They usually really give back to the industry in many of the things we ask them to. Now, all in all, 70,000, almost 80,000 actually now, if you look at 2020 numbers, people work at the Tel Aviv tech industry, which is 20% of Israel. But you have to remember that it's one very, very small city. So it's actually, and to show on top of that, when you see on the capital raise or the exits, you see that actually half of the capital raise is done in Tel Aviv. And I can tell you to scratch those numbers because I really just today got the new ones. And we actually had a record year in over $6.9 billion of capital raised for startup in Tel Aviv only, which is half of Israel, which also had an amazing year of $14 billion money raised for companies. And the exits as well, as you can see, there is also around half of the $9 billion that Israel had this year. Now it's harder, in exits, it's sometimes harder to really monitor it because you have sometimes mega deals, as they call, like 2 years ago, Intel acquired Mobileye, Israeli and Jerusalem-based, I have to say, a startup in $16 billion, so it changed the whole graph. So I'm not showing you a graph, but it was a record year also in IPOs of Tel Avivian companies that went to the market, and mostly in NASDAQ, but also in the London Stock Exchange and New York Stock Exchange and others. And I can tell you also that it was the record year. We have 20 unicorns already based in Tel Aviv, which we are actually in Europe. We are the second largest, just after London, who has around 40, and more than Paris and more than Zurich and more than Berlin and others. So, and again, 14 of them were declared or measured a unicorn just this year. So this is also something that we're of course very proud of. Now, one of the understanding that is very important to get while working again, in the municipal, when you look at, in a way, the bigger picture, you see that we used to say how Tel Aviv and Israel at all is very strong, and we have a lot of startup, and we measure. When I started the fundraising for my fund in 2012, I used to say there were more startups in Israel than all of Europe together. Now, this was true then, it's not true anymore. And if you take now the number of startups that you have all over Europe, you have them everywhere. It's not only London and Berlin. You have definitely in Belgrade, and I'm sure also very close to where you're studying as well, because it's something that is now I think every government, but also every city understand that it's one of its major strength and is working to enforce it. So Tel Aviv at least has to find its, at least brand-wise, has to find its place and really keep on talking on our strength. And one of the things that we're leading it is the fact that we have a very strong deep tech companies. These are the leading sectors in Tel Aviv. As you see, AI, you have almost 45 of the companies are in Israel are based in Tel Aviv, big data and cloud, fintech, cyber, and other. So this is, again, one of the things that we will have to keep on telling the world how we are strong in, but you see when you look deep into the ecosystem. Now, as I said, in my department, which is the International Economic Development, we try and take the whole Tel Aviv brand in order to, one, bring more activity to the city, attract more investment, attract more companies to come and build their R&D centers on one hand, and on the other hand, help and support the local ecosystem with these international connections, especially now during COVID, when they were in a way very cut off of their reach, at least in the beginning. We did a lot of hackathon and events and webinars with our counterparts around the world to keep this connection going. So it's just one of the examples. And this is just to name a few of the things that we work together, because we work very closely with the ecosystem, with all of the parts that I mentioned, identifying exactly what their needs are, which are changing, and keeping this relationship and catering to their needs to keep them as strong part of the city life. And as I said, harnessing the city's global connection to their benefits, if we can do that. Of course, we offer soft landing services to entrepreneurs or companies or investors who are eager to come and work with or stay in Tel Aviv. And we have a chain actually of municipal entrepreneurship center, which I will talk about a little later again. And the other thing that we're doing is monitoring and supporting where this city stands in research and ranking, actually. Because a lot of the companies that are interested in the city, that are looking to maybe open a new office or expand to Tel Aviv, is looking at those ranking and research. What does it say about the city? And we're working very hard. It's a lot of actually delivering the data, because unfortunately a lot of the data here sometimes, even from the formal bodies, is in Hebrew, which doesn't really help those companies, international companies. But it also, even the fact that to monitor exactly where we stand and what we do and what is supposed to be the next step. As I mentioned before, probably know Startup Genome, which is, I think, one of the oldest companies that started measuring ecosystem, starting showing and comparing them and ranking them and showing exactly where are your strengths and what others are doing better than you. So this is one of the things. We are there at number 6 in the world, which is not per capita. Usually when we're measured per capita, we're very successful, but we're measured against the giant like Beijing in the valley. So we still are there, number 6, tied with LA. We have only the Valley, New York, Berlin, Boston, and London ahead of us. But we understand that it won't last forever. And as mentioned before, we have one of the things that I'm really thinking hard on is how to keep on promoting Tel Aviv, even though we are small. And in other measures that are also important for people who are intending to come and live here Is it a leading financial center? Is it safe? Is the company just this week, a new research showed that Tel Aviv is number 6 in the healthiest city to live in. So in all of these aspects, we're working. I think I went through that. As I said, we have the municipal entrepreneurial centers. One of the things that we understood that the city actually, and every public, I think, entity has the obligation to support the ecosystem from the very first steps. The fact that the ecosystem matured and now a lot of the companies we're very happy to talk about the success of companies and the money that they raise, but it actually makes it harder for the young entrepreneurs and the starting companies because they are a bit left behind, even in the sense that it's not that cool to invest now in early stage. Everybody wants to invest in growth. So we started these 7 entrepreneurial centers that are focused on a variety of issues, starting from for example, the library, which is in the south side of Tel Aviv, which is not the most fortunate neighborhood, and bringing the startup city into the residents and combining and focusing on impact and environmental tech. We have Citizen, which is an amazing initiative, which actually we created a living lab for companies that are interested in working with the municipality that has anything to do with smart cities and want to answer any of the challenges the municipality have. It can be on transportation, it can be on clean air, it can be on water, it can be on education or so many other, or waste management or so many other challenges that the municipality is putting on its challenges, and companies, very young startups are trying to see if they answer, and they get into 1-year program in which they get not funding, but a really strong envelope of people, both experts from the municipality and from the industry itself and the ecosystem. And they can, after this year, actually, the municipality is considering if it is interesting enough to pilot with them or buy the basic product yet and keep on working, or maybe it's not really what we wanted and they have to keep on going. But there are also other centers that are focused on specific population. If it's the Sarona Hub is for youth, the Yefet one is in Jaffa and focused about the Arab community, and so forth. Now, another thing that we're using is we launched a program called the Tel Aviv Tech Ambassadors. We chose 30-some companies, startup ranging from a variety of sectors, but also in different stages. And actually we used them, we are working with them to showcase what Tel Aviv ecosystem has to offer whenever we had delegations and visitors and conferences and events. But we also brought them the international exposure and some opportunity when we brought a lot of those relevant investors or visitors to meet them. So this was launched last year with 30 companies, and now it will be expanded to 50 companies. We're just going out with an outreach to ask some more companies. Now, unfortunately, though I told you about all the great things, it's not only good things, of course. We have challenges. We are focusing, and this is even not specific to COVID, because the Israeli tech and the Tel Avivian tech went through this pandemic in an amazing, really an amazing way. And it's been, as I told you, a record year in all the things that you can manage. But still, as both a country and a municipality, we have a lot of challenges. And if we want to attract more talent into the industry, we have to diversify it. We have to actually enable it to larger groups of the population. We have a very hard immigration work policy, so it's not very easy for us to attract talent and investment from abroad. And we're very, very focused on the fact that not working on downsizing the social gaps and not using the tech to widen. So as you say, and just as I said, we're definitely feeling in a way at the top, but there's a lot of work to be done, not only staying at the top, but even staying leading in so many of the ways. So I think that is mostly what I wanted to tell you about my journey in Tel Aviv and what we do. And I'm very, very eager to answer questions. Do you want me to read from the chat? Is it? Jana, I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Okay, sorry. Ms. Michaeli, thank you for your exceptional lecture and for sharing with us your experience.
Okay.
Do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, now let's get started with the discussion. Before we start the discussion, because I see that we have some, I would like to ask our Professor Jelena Eric to address you.
Thank you.
Okay, Jelena, please. Jelena, could you hear me?
Sorry, amateur mistake.
Okay.
Okay. First of all, I would like to greet you, to say hello, everybody from Denmark, from Copenhagen. Special greetings for our distinguished lecturer, and thank you for very inspiring and interesting presentation. By the way, I am Associate Professor of Entrepreneurship and Management on Faculty of Economics in Kragujevac, so I have to take this opportunity to say hello to my colleagues and to our participants, our dear students. They are the most important in this event tonight. Normally I teach entrepreneurship, and I also teach corporate entrepreneurship and green entrepreneurship on a bachelor and on a master level. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because we have excellent group of participants here, students who are genuinely interested in entrepreneurship. And in this period, in last few weeks, we had a chance to hear a lot of excellent presentations from different students already developing different business ideas or planning to develop business ideas. I have to say that their business ideas are a lot on the track of your presentation today, because they are mostly dedicated to high-tech and green solutions. If you don't mind, I would like to mention just a few ideas they're interested in. For example, we have organic production, organic beauty, art design, different types of applications, for example, for cognitive rehabilitation, a virtual assistant, many other types of applications. Then also they're interested in green packaging solutions, clean energy, and so on, so on. So I am very pleased we have opportunity tonight to hear experience from Israel, especially because I know from theory, from literature, but also from the practice that Israel is on the forefront of entrepreneurial efforts worldwide. So this is a really outstanding opportunity. Therefore, I would like to ask you something. I was really impressed a few years ago when I was reading a book, Startup Nation, very famous book you are referring to in your presentation. But I was especially impressed reading about culture. in Israel. I mean, Israel is located on Middle East, but culture, national culture somehow is very Western oriented, if I can say like that. So, how do you explain that? I mean, this is a little bit of paradox, I would say. And how is your culture helping developing these initiatives in high-tech business? I mean, I know this is a complicated question, but maybe just a short comment.
Yeah, of course. We don't have 2 days.
We don't have a lot of time for this, yes, but it is very interesting to hear about.
No, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. That's a great question. I really, I would really enjoy, talking about it. But I think I will refer it from 2 sides. One is the not that very optimistic side. The fact that Israel Israel started in conflict, and we live even today quite surrounded by countries that some we don't really have any peace agreements or relationship, but still sometimes at war. So from day one, we are in this feeling that that is why we're not a true part of the Middle East, because we kept ourselves completely isolated on one hand, and we really embraced the support and the connection to Europe. Mostly Europe, it was in the first years of the country, and later the United States. So in the sense, that's why you said we're not Middle Eastern in behavior or in culture. And sometimes I feel that it's one of the things that we missed on that. And we hopefully eventually, when things get better, and it's getting better little by little, that we can embrace also our surrounding, because we could have also be the center for the Middle East and work with all of those countries and their market. But at least to take it on the best note, and the fact that since Israel is so small, and since we don't really have an interesting market, it actually compels all the companies to operate from their first day, really, looking to expand to the global world and working on globalization from really the first. There are startups that doesn't even pilot here, because eventually they say it's, on one hand, it's easier, it's closer to home, you know the language, everything, but then when you have to really take it to your target market, you have to study the market and the relevant, if it's regulation or if it's a customer behavior, all over again. So why bother in Israel? Eventually it wouldn't be the market. And just very funny, as a municipality, I was talking to one of the CEO of the scale-up, who usually lived in the United States. They grew, and immediately he moved to the Valley, and he came back during the first lockdown, after the first lockdown, to be with his family here. And he really came to the municipality and said, I really want to support, I love what you're doing here, but their platform that really supports small businesses doesn't work in Hebrew, doesn't work in Israel, is not connected to the whole bank system here. So they really couldn't really help us. Just to show you that his company, that he raised over $25 million, he employs 150 employees, and he works solely in the United States, though 90% of his company is living here. Okay. This is, it started as something that I thought nobody thought it would be an advantage, but eventually the spirit. One of the things is that everybody start here with understanding that they're going to go global.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we have some question at our chat. Can you answer this question?
Yes, let's see.
Okay. Or would you like that I read the question?
Maybe you answer. Could you tell us how hard it is for very young entrepreneur, example like us, just finishing university, to start a business in Tel Aviv? Are there state stimulation?
Okay.
Well, that's a very good question, and we would really love, I think one of the things that we're missing is the diversity, as I said. not only in the fact that women, men, and different type of the population, but also to bring new ideas and new blood from wherever it is in the world. And just before COVID started, we initiated a program that is now unfortunately on hold to bring talent to Tel Aviv. If you want to come and start your company here, they're not great government stimulations, but there is a special visa for entrepreneurial visa. Or if you're already working in the tech and you find job here, the company can get you working visa, very, very great visa that also allows you to bring your partner with a work visa for them. And it's for 1 to 5 years. So at least we're working on that, but we were really focusing on going on a real pan-European campaign to draw talent to Tel Aviv. Not only because we wanted diversity, but also we have a very severe shortage of employees. Just before COVID, we were talking about 18,000 jobs missing in Israel at all, but around half of them in Tel Aviv. So just if you can, the best way is to find a company that wants to employ you here, and then it's the easiest way, of course. But even if not, there's an entrepreneurial visa. I can send you the link later to find and then you're under the roof of one of those entrepreneurial centers, but they also help you with acceleration programs and other, but not unfortunately with monetary compensations.
Okay, I think we have 2 more questions from Jovan Milutinovic. Is asking you, what is in your experience, most often necessary to provide the startup companies that are just developing?
I think the most important thing is the mentoring, actually, because the beginning, any entrepreneurial way is very, very confusing. You hear a lot of things, you're looking to find the right path for you, and you have a lot of examples to look up to, but on the other hand, it's hard to really understand how to implement it on your specific product, technology, market. And mentoring is a great way to get not only the attention of somebody that already went through that and can help you really identify their specific challenges and give you from their experience, but it's also a great way to network, because when they mentor you, they really, usually you have their network at your benefit. And this is also very, very important. So I would say the mentoring and networking is the most important thing at the beginning.
Okay, we have some more questions. I think they are similar, but I will read them. Could you tell us what else except idea and money is needed necessary to start a business? And we have, this is a question from Nevena Blagojevic, and we have a question from Emilia Davinic, which is maybe similar. My question is, what ways the university and how does education in general encourage and teach the young people about it? We have more questions after that.
Okay, so let me start with the universities and the colleges, because I think that a few years back, it wasn't the center of innovation, at least here in Tel Aviv. A lot of the innovation came around it in a way. I think that most of the entrepreneurs, I know that Tel Aviv University is ranked number 8 in the world in the sense that their students later form successful companies. And also I think 8 in the world in unicorn companies of their graduates. But since we have specifically in Israel, as I said, the army and many of the army technology unit, which also the army is also something that is moving more than just using tanks and guns to using technology. So it needs more people to operate it and work in it. And so also the school for computer and technical abilities in the army itself grew, I don't know, 100 times since my days there, for example. So it actually gives you a pipeline of people that came out from the army with also the training. Many times during their army service, especially if it's extended, they also go to the university and finish their degree there. but they also have the experience, and they also have the networking, and also they have the understanding of some of the system, how it works. So in a sense, that this is one of the ways that, of course, I don't recommend Serbia to have the same thing, but this is one way. But now I think, and I see it, I think in the last 5 years, that you see that every university or college has also, on top of the entrepreneurial studies, it have entrepreneurial programs, and it have accelerators program. I was mentoring one of the accelerator program at the school that I did my undergrad degree. And we have, I think, already 3 projects that eventually came into a successful startup that had an exit. So it's harder to take the academic way of thinking and research and publishing and really bringing it to the technology world of today. But I think it's important to have the basic in the education, to have the wider base to build on that. But it's not a necessary path. And I know that people that succeeded not from the academia or the army. So, but I really appreciate the fact that you have that basis. And you can grow.
Okay. I didn't hear you well. So it is obviously that that your lecture was very interesting for our students, and we have more questions. Arsena Podgorac from the module Innovation and Technological Entrepreneurship has a question about green innovation. She's interested in what do you think that attracts investors and funding for green innovation?
Well, that's a very good question, because we see, of course, in the initiative of the green innovation, and specifically the municipality have a environmental division, or it's very connected to the environment and the ecosystem in Tel Aviv. But I think investors are still quite reluctant. There's not a lot of investor in this area yet, because the development processes are quite long, and it's hard for them to understand and see the regulation is moving in the same way as the technology. I think the technology is preceding the regulation in so many years. So at least here I see that there's a gap there's a lot of companies, but most of their investment are coming from outside of Israel, actually. And I hope that will change soon, because it's important to support that. And some of these initiatives are amazing. One of the startups that I was actually helping in the beginning develop this box that you have in every room or every apartment. It really gives you an amazing feedback on the quality of the air that you have, or the noise, or all of these measurements that you need. And they're really working very hard to take this technology to a bigger scale and work with municipalities, for example, or areas, not specifically on a building. And it's really a very hard way.
Okay, she has one more question about how do you think we can rise a level of innovation in our country, if I understand good well, or how
can you?
Yes.
The question is, who can do it? I think one of the very interesting, very in a way, not the expensive, complicated thing, but I understand that culturally is an issue. And as just if Professor Yelena asked in the beginning about the culture, I think one of the things that we are very good at is the culture of entrepreneurial. The fact that you can start again, and if you fail, it's not the end of the world. And if you want, and there's this culture that in the beginning when I entered surprised me of really sharing and supporting each other. It's not something that is very common in I know in other countries, for example. But if you can encourage that, if you can really harness the successful entrepreneurs to give back to the ecosystem, to come to attend a lot, when hopefully it will be physical soon, the meetups, when everybody can come to them and ask questions, when everybody can pitch to them their ideas. And if you can really, and this is also something that we really do, it feels like naturally, but I think this is something that you don't have to really, prepare a government program for it and find funding. This is something that you have to start small and hopefully expand, and mostly just make people proud of what they are and what they contribute to the ecosystem, and give back to them, so they will be a strong part in it. And this is something then, even because I know that in many of the cities that we talk to sometimes, they say, well, we have great startup, but as soon as they succeed, they go out to New York or wherever. They don't stay here. They don't give back to the ecosystem, and they're not part of what's happening. So this is something that I think it's not easy to achieve, but on the other hand, it doesn't really require resources and long programs. And mostly to learn from look around you and learn from what's happening in other places and see the best practices that you can implement. If it's supporting the small entrepreneurial and the first by government or by local government, this is something that we usually envy Europe, that there are a lot of much more initiatives that are sponsored and funded by governments than in Israel. In Israel, it's much more the private market. So it has its advantages, but still. So this is also something that we can really do.
Okay, if you don't mind, I would like to read more questions. If you, okay.
Yes, yes.
Claudia Lois Gaich asked you, what are the biggest barriers when starting a business in Tel Aviv as a foreigner?
Yeah, this is what I said that we're trying to overcome. The first one is the visa and the immigration policy. As I said, it's unfortunately, I really don't like even to say it, but Israel is not very kind in its immigration policy, and it's hard to get past that. Of course, if you're Jewish, it's easier and you can come and you're very welcome. But other than that, you have to find, for example, either a sponsor company or a company that will employ you, and then they can issue this visa for you, or as an entrepreneur. But if you just, I don't know, want to come and open a business which is not tech business, I really don't know of ways to do it, unless you're a big corporate that, can negotiate with the municipality. But also then usually the foreign company employs local people in most of the cases. So the biggest obstacle is that. Another one I think is a little bit the language, because a lot of people speak English in Tel Aviv, really the majority, and you see, and there are a lot of ex-European or others, so you hear a lot of French here, you hear a lot of Russian, you hear a lot of languages, but basically the day-to-day work is usually in Hebrew or English. You can manage in English, but you have to be at least fluent in English in order to do that. And mostly if you have, a unique, I don't know, product or a set of skills or whatever, this is easier to get by that and to offer that in the beginning.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Teodora Vranic. Which are the most common business ideas of women in Israel? Mm-hmm. Interesting question.
Luckily, I will say that it divides. There are around 50% that vary in all the aspects. And you have amazing entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs that have ideas in cyber and fintech and in all of the areas. But around 50% of the entrepreneurs that I met are focused around parenting and as they call the women or the home issues, which usually doesn't really succeed eventually. Because, and this is one of the things that I usually tell the entrepreneurs, and if you are coming to that because you're specifically now, I don't know, you became a parent and you're finding that there's lacking something in the industry, wait a few months and see if it's true need. Because it usually comes out when they are specifically surrounded by that. So it really clutters their judgment. But in other, we have really amazing entrepreneurs that with the most successful companies. There's Kaltura, who raised over $120 million who's doing a specific video for organization, video analysis there. I know this amazing entrepreneur, Yael, who basically actually came out of the army. She was a commander in the Air Force, and her startup is actually doing this image processing that used for eBay and all the commerce sites, that you can see yourself in a dress and you can see the rug in your living room. And she took this experience to her startup and many more. So hopefully we will see more amazing like that.
Okay, thank you. I think we have 2 more questions. What Uroš Matović asked you to give some advices for young entrepreneurs.
First of all, being an entrepreneur is hard, really. Because really when I started Eva Ventures, I was definitely an entrepreneur. You have to understand why you get up and start all over again every single day, because this is the way it is. It's not like going to work and you have a structured day schedule and you have the whole structure around you. It's something that you really need. First of all, you need to really want it. And I think what helped me mostly was the understanding that I heard somebody say, it's not my line. She said, actually, you already have the no in your pocket. So ask. The worst case, you'll succeed. So I was trying to remind myself that many times. Just for example, when I was raising money in the United States and they set up a lot of meetings for me. And because I was talking about the gender equality, the first people that I met in the beginning was almost all women. And because people heard me and said, okay, I know this woman, she's very rich, maybe she can be an investor. But then you go and meet her and she's amazingly rich and she lives in an amazing apartment on Fifth Avenue. But she doesn't really manage her money. So she can't be my investor because she sends me to her finance managers who regarded me just as one of the other investors. So sometimes some of those meetings, I would go out after a day or 3 or 4 meetings. I would just really, truly wanted to lay at bed and never get out again. And it was very hard sometimes getting those no's. And sometimes it was even people that didn't really bother to return my emails or phone calls or whatever. So this is something that you keep reminding yourself why you get up in the morning, what's the end goal, and where do I want to see myself eventually. That at least for me, it really helped. Because you have to remember, it's hard. And you always have the possibility to give up and go back to a different job, but not really. If it's in you, you want to go and do it. So this is one thing. And the second one is really see every connection and every person that you meet as an opportunity. Because true, if you really are open to that, if you meet, for example, I don't remember now, but who actually made the connection between me and Daniela from the Israeli embassy in Belgrade. But somebody told her about me. We talked on the phone. It was great. She invited me and I participated in the conference in Belgrade. And then we had other encounters, but also this time. So it never ends. It's something that you build, a network that you build with people that later on will be at your service, I'm sure. And I'm sure you can, as you can help others. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. We have one more question related to organic production. What do you think we need to develop first when we would like to start organic production?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the organic production?
Organic production. What do you think
more about that?
To develop first? Milita Alexic asked you this question.
Maybe I'm not sure that I understand what the organic production is, or something that is specific.
Some green entrepreneurship, I think it is.
I understand.
Related to.
I don't really. I think that I have.
Dana, can I help?
Okay.
Yeah. Please.
Jelena.
Can you hear me? Yes, organic production, this is maybe not correct English. We are referring to food production. That's what she meant. So if you have any recommendation about food processing, growing food in ecologic way, simply.
Okay, now I understand. I'm sorry. Actually, it's not, I'm not very strong at the food tech sector, so I have to say that this is, I don't think that I can really have a lot to contribute in that. But I can say that I see just the most amazing, even the small gardens now, roof gardens, it's now become a thing during COVID. It was something that was really encouraged. So specifically in Tel Aviv, it's after years of fumbling around it because of the regulation and they weren't sure if it's good or what needed. COVID actually pushed that further amazingly. And the whole hydroponic area is also developing with green. But unfortunately, other than that, I'm not great on this field.
Okay, thank you very much for your patience. And dear students, thank you very much for your active participation at this lecture. Now, once again, I would like to thank to all of you who followed and enabled this lecture. I hope that the next lecture we can organize here at Kragujevac at Faculty of Economics. And Ms. Michaeli, we are looking forward to seeing you here in Kragujevac. Dear students, I would like to address you. I think it was very valuable and helpful lecture for you, and I think it significantly contributes to your knowledge. Finally, I would like to ask to all of you to turn on your cameras so we can take a photo together. Okay, if you don't mind, I would like to have some memory.
Keep on smiling.
Okay.
Keep on smiling.
Okay. I think that
that's how many cameras we'll get.
Yes, we have. At the moment, we have about 50 participants, but we have some more listeners via YouTube channel. I didn't say that. Yes. Great.
Great, great. Okay. Wow, it's great to see you all. I was so 2 or 3 every time, so it's great to see you all.
Thank you. I think we can finish this lecture.
Thank you again. Thank you very much for inviting me. I enjoyed it immensely, and I really wish all of you a lot of success and luck, and that you come and visit Tel Aviv and Israel soon, hopefully.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for your kind words, and I hope, as I said, to see you soon in Kragujevac.
I wish.
Yes. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.